The heart monitor flatlined at 2:17 a.m., its monotone wail cutting through the storm-battered clinic. Lightning flashed against rain-streaked windows as Dr. Sarah Mitchell's bloodshot eyes met her exhausted team's. 87 hours of fight, gone in one endless tone. "No, Max, don't you dare," Ryan Anderson whispered, his weathered face contorted as he dropped to his knees beside the operating table. The German shepherd's once powerful frame lay motionless, ribs protruding beneath patchy fur, wounds telling stories no living creature should endure. Sarah barked orders, her hands performing compressions with mechanical precision. 1 minute, 2 minutes. The storm knocked the lights out momentarily before the generator hummed to life. Then, impossibly, a beep. Weak, erratic, but unmistakable. In 20 years of veterinary medicine, Sarah's voice trailed off as she pressed her stethoscope against the dog's chest, I've never seen anyone come back from this far gone. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments along with the city you're watching from now. Let's continue with the story. Ryan Anderson hadn't spoken more than a dozen words to anyone in the 3 years since his honorable discharge. At 38, the former Army Ranger moved through life like a ghost, haunting the edges of Bridgewater, Connecticut, a town small enough to notice him but gracious enough to respect his silence. His apartment above Wilson's Hardware was sparse and functional, much like his daily routine. Early morning runs, part-time maintenance work at the VA center, and long evenings watching the world from his fire escape. The nightmares came like clockwork, shattering what little peace he carved out for himself. Behind his closed eyes, flames, screams, and decisions no man should have to make. His military therapist called it PTSD. Ryan called it penance. Max, before Ryan found him, had been a shadow of military excellence. The 7-year-old German Shepherd service record would have made any handler proud. 3 tours, specialized training in search and rescue, commendations for valor. Now his coat hung in patches over a skeletal frame, infected wounds mapping a history of systematic abuse. The dog tag embedded in his matted fur had been deliberately defaced, but not completely destroyed. Dr. Sarah Mitchell ran Bridgewater Veterinary Clinic with the precision she'd learned from her late husband, a combat medic who never made it home from Afghanistan. At 48, her compassion remained intact despite the walls she'd built around her heart. The clinic operated on razor-thin margins, her pro bono work often threatening its survival. Local farmers called her a miracle worker. Her accountant called her foolish. Eleanor Winters had watched Bridgewater change for 85 years from her Victorian on Maple Street. Widowed for longer than she'd been married, she maintained her garden with the same fierce attention she'd once given her husband and the military K-9 units he'd trained. Her disapproving glances at Ryan's comings and goings masked a recognition she wasn't ready to acknowledge. 20 miles away in Hartford, Sean Parker's corner office overlooked the Connecticut capital. At 42, the former Army captain had transformed personal tragedy into corporate success, building Parker Insurance into a regional powerhouse through ruthless efficiency. His smile never reached his eyes, especially when the familiar nightmares interrupted his carefully constructed life. Nightmares of fire, family, and a German shepherd who chose the wrong person to save. The summer heat settled over Bridgewater like a heavy blanket, promising the kind of oppressive months where secrets rise to the surface and old wounds refuse to stay buried. The Tuesday evening shift at the Veterans Center ended like any other for Ryan, locking up, checking the perimeter, and walking the 5 blocks home in silence. June humidity pressed against his skin as he cut through the back alley, a route chosen for its lack of small-talk opportunities rather than convenience. The metallic clang of the dumpster lid caught his attention. Probably raccoons again. He would have kept walking if not for the sound that followed, a weak, barely audible whimper that stopped him cold. Behind the dumpster, pressed against the brick wall, lay what Ryan first mistook for a discarded, mud-covered blanket, until it moved. The German shepherd's eyes, one swollen shut, one clouded with infection, found Ryan's, and something ancient passed between them. Recognition without introduction. The dog made no attempt to run or fight when Ryan crouched down, which worried him more than any aggression would have. This wasn't surrender. It was resignation. "Easy, buddy," Ryan murmured, his voice rusty from disuse, ribs like barrel staves pressed against skin. Open wounds festered along the dog's flank. One leg lay at an unnatural angle. Worst of all was the deliberate pattern to the injuries. This was no accident or neglect. Someone had systematically broken this animal. Ryan removed his jacket despite the heat and inched forward. The dog's remaining good eye tracked him warily, but allowed Ryan to slide the fabric underneath his broken frame. With infinite care, Ryan lifted the makeshift hammock, surprised by how little the large breed weighed. The dog released a single yelp before going silent, the kind of silence Ryan recognized from men who'd learned that showing pain only invited more. Bridgewater Veterinary Clinic was closing when Ryan shouldered through the door, the bell announcing his arrival with inappropriate cheerfulness. "We need help," he said simply, the first words he'd spoken to anyone in town beyond necessary transactions. Sarah Mitchell looked up from her computer, glasses perched on her nose, her expression shifting from annoyance at the late interruption to professional focus in an instant. "Exam room 1, now." She called for her assistant while washing her hands, already assessing the situation through the doorway. The initial examination confirmed Ryan's worst fears. Severe malnutrition, multiple untreated fractures, some weeks old, systemic infection, internal parasites. Sarah's clinical tone couldn't mask her anger. Someone did this deliberately and over time. She looked up from the thermometer. "He's severely hypothermic despite the heat. That's shock." The assistant worked quickly, inserting an IV while Sarah drew blood samples. "I'll need to run tests, start aggressive antibiotics, and get fluids in him immediately. We're looking at hospitalization, probable surgery for that leg, transfusion." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "Sir, I should warn you, his chances aren't good. Maybe 1% being optimistic." Ryan nodded once, a military acknowledgement of intel received. "What's the immediate cost?" The question caught Sarah off guard. Most people asked if the dog would make it. "Initial stabilization, overnight critical care, and diagnostics. Probably $3,000. If he survives until morning, we're looking at another $12,000 minimum for what he'll need." Ryan reached for his wallet, extracting a VA card and faded debit card. "I can put down $500 tonight. I get paid Friday. I can give you another $400 then." Sarah studied him, noticing for the first time the worn edges of his clothing, the careful economy of his movements. "Mr. Anderson. Ryan Anderson." "Mr. Anderson, I'm not sure you understand. Even if you could afford this treatment, his chances of survival are minimal. The humane option would be—" "I understand percentages, ma'am." Something in Ryan's voice made Sarah stop. "I've beaten worse odds." Sarah's assistant whispered something in her ear about the clinic's financial situation. She waved him away. "We'll start treatment. I need you to fill out some paperwork. Does he have a name?" Ryan looked at the dog, now connected to monitors and fluids. "There's a tag under all that mess. Couldn't read it." The assistant carefully cleaned around the dog's neck, revealing a military-style tag that had been partially defaced. Looks like M-A-X. Then something scratched out. Max, Ryan repeated, the single syllable hanging in the air. Night fell as Sarah worked, her assistant eventually leaving at 10. She emerged from the treatment area at midnight to find Ryan still in the waiting room, sitting ramrod straight in a molded plastic chair. He's stable for now. Critical but fighting. You should go home, Mr. Anderson. We'll call if anything changes. Ryan didn't move. I'll stay, if that's all right. Something in his expression stopped her from arguing. There's a staff room with a couch. It's not comfortable, but I've slept worse places. He followed her to the small break room with its sagging couch and humming refrigerator. Sarah hesitated at the door. We're doing everything possible, but you should prepare yourself. Animals this compromised often don't make it through the first night. After she left, Ryan settled onto the couch, body aching from tension rather than the thin cushions. Sleep wouldn't come, hadn't come easily for years. At 2 a.m., he made his way to the treatment area where Max lay connected to monitors and tubes, a heating blanket maintaining his temperature. You picked a hard road, Max, Ryan said quietly, pulling a metal folding chair next to the kennel. The sound of his own voice felt strange in the darkness. Don't know what happened to you, but I recognize the look. Seen it in the mirror. He stretched his leg, the old injury aching with the coming rain. Seen it in better men than me. The monitors beeped steadily, marking time as Ryan began talking, really talking, for the first time in years. He spoke about Afghanistan, about the nightmares, about the fire that woke him screaming most nights. As he spoke, fragments of memory surfaced, flames engulfing an apartment building, civilians screaming, his unit responding, the weight of decisions made in seconds that lasted lifetimes. Dawn broke with Sarah finding Ryan asleep in the chair, his hand resting near but not touching the edge of Max's kennel. The dog's vital signs had stabilized slightly, defying her medical expectations. Mr. Anderson? She touched his shoulder gently. Ryan woke instantly, fully alert, a soldier's response. How is he? Slightly improved, but... She took a deep breath, compassion warring with professional responsibility. I need to discuss realistic options. His suffering is significant. Sometimes the kindest choice is to let go. Ryan looked at Max, then back to Sarah. His voice, when it came, carried the weight of hard-earned wisdom. Some battles aren't measured by the odds of winning, Dr. Mitchell. They're measured by what they're worth fighting for. 3 days passed in a fog of antibiotics, wound treatments, and cautious hope. Ryan divided his time between necessary work shifts and the clinic, sleeping upright in that same metal chair. Sarah found herself making excuses to check on Max during off hours, bringing coffee for Ryan that often went cold before he remembered to drink it. On the 4th morning, Sarah was shaving a small patch of fur from Max's shoulder for another IV placement when she paused, her fingers detecting something beneath the skin. There's something here, she murmured, reaching for a handheld scanner. The device beeped affirmatively. He's microchipped. Within an hour, they had their answer. The screen displayed not a typical owner registration, but a military identification code. Sarah's tech made some calls, pulling strings with a cousin in the Army Veterinary Corps. Max was a military working dog, Sarah explained when Ryan arrived that evening. Specialized in search and rescue, attached to the 3rd Ranger Battalion until 3 years ago. She watched Ryan's face carefully. Your battalion, according to your paperwork? Ryan's expression didn't change, but his knuckles whitened against the chair arm. I don't remember him. He was transferred to another unit right before you were discharged. After that, he was listed as retired for medical reasons. adopted out through proper channels. Sarah's professional demeanor slipped. Someone lied. Military dogs receive thorough screening of adopters. Whoever did this circumvented the system. That night, fragments of Ryan's dreams shifted. The familiar burning building remained, but now a dog moved through the smoke, not toward safety, but deeper into danger, toward him. By day 7, Max's blood work showed the first signs of improvement. The most severe infection had responded to the antibiotic cocktail, though his kidneys struggled with the medication load. When Sarah placed the latest bill on the counter, now exceeding $8,000, Ryan simply nodded and added another $300 from his maintenance job. Molly Jenkins from the Bridgewater Gazette stopped by that afternoon, supposedly for a routine rabies awareness article. Her real interest became clear when she spotted Ryan in the waiting room. "Mr. Anderson, I heard you rescued a military service dog. Mind if I ask a few questions?" Ryan declined comment, but Sarah, seeing opportunity, provided enough details to craft a story. 2 days later, "Local veteran fights to save military hero dog" appeared on page 3. The article included the clinic's contact information and a discreet mention of the mounting medical costs. Small donations began trickling in. $20 from the VFW post, $50 from the elementary school bake sale, spare change collected at Wilson's Hardware. A Facebook fundraiser launched by one of Sarah's vet techs raised nearly $700 in 3 days. Eleanor Winters read the article with pursed lips over her morning tea. That afternoon, she appeared at the clinic with a covered dish, sharply informing the receptionist, "Tell that Anderson boy that dogs need proper nutrition to heal, not that processed garbage they sell these days." She left without waiting for a reply. The dish contained homemade beef stew with rice, still warm, with a handwritten note listing ingredients specifically chosen for canine recovery. Similar dishes appeared every other day, always delivered with the same performative disapproval. On day 10, while Ryan was briefly away at work, Sarah noticed Max's ear twitch when she mentioned Ryan's name. She tried an experiment, speaking in the tone she'd heard Ryan use during his night vigils. No response. Then she remembered the military connection and, feeling slightly foolish, barked, "Attention!" in her best drill sergeant imitation. Max's right ear twitched distinctly. His breathing pattern changed for precisely 8 seconds. When Ryan returned, Sarah showed him the noteworthy vital sign changes. "Try giving him a military command," she suggested. Ryan hesitated, then leaned close to Max's ear and quietly said, "Stand ready." The monitors registered an immediate spike in heart rate. Max's paw moved a centimeter, then stilled. "He hears you," Sarah whispered. "Somewhere in there. He knows who you are." That night, Ryan dreamed more clearly of the apartment fire. He saw himself pinned beneath fallen debris, flames approaching, and a German shepherd, ignoring commands from another handler, plunging through the fire to reach him. 30 miles away in Hartford, Sean Parker sat in his corner office reviewing acquisition documents when his assistant placed the Bridgewater Gazette on his desk, open to page 3. "Thought you might want to see this, sir. Isn't Bridgewater where you grew up?" Sean's eyes locked onto the grainy photo of the sedated German shepherd. The coffee mug in his hand shattered against the floor, scalding liquid splashing across imported carpet. His assistant stared in shock. Mr. Parker never lost control. "Get me everything on this dog and this man," Sean said, his voice deadly calm despite his trembling hands. "Everything." By the 3rd week, Ryan had established a rhythm that revolved entirely around Max's care. He arrived at the clinic each morning at 5:30, an hour before Sarah officially opened, to help with Max's morning treatments. Then he'd work his maintenance shift at the VA center from 8 o'clock to 2 o'clock, eating lunch while walking back to the clinic, where he'd stay until Sarah practically pushed him out at 9 o'clock p.m. The routine should have exhausted him. Instead, it anchored him. "Your bandage-changing technique is getting better than my technician's," Sarah remarked one morning, watching Ryan's careful hands redress one of Max's healing wounds. What she didn't say was how she'd noticed the changes in Ryan himself, the slight relaxation around his eyes, the occasional half-smile when Max showed improvement, the way his sentences grew longer each day. For the first time in years, Ryan was sleeping, not the fitful dozing that had been his norm, but actual rest. Not through the night, never that, but 3 or 4 uninterrupted hours felt miraculous. The nightmares still came, but now they included moments of clarity. Max moving through smoke, finding Ryan trapped beneath a collapsed beam, dragging him toward an exit despite commands being shouted from elsewhere. On day 14, while Ryan was gently massaging Max's atrophied muscles as Sarah had taught him, the dog's eyes opened. Not the vacant, unfocused gaze of previous days, but clear, alert, present. Ryan froze, afraid any movement would break the spell. Max held his gaze for 12 seconds. Ryan counted each one, before his eyes drifted closed again. "He saw me," Ryan told Sarah later, his voice thick with emotion he couldn't name. "The medications are finally at therapeutic levels," she explained clinically, but her smile betrayed her own excitement. "His latest blood work shows the infection is retreating. White blood cell count still high, but trending in the right direction." She hesitated. "His kidneys are showing some strain from the medications. We'll need to monitor that." Eleanor Winters continued her routine of food deliveries, each dish more elaborate than the last. Her pretense of disapproval gradually softened to grudging acknowledgement of Ryan's presence, then to direct instructions on how to properly prepare her recipes for when that animal is ready for real food. On day 17, Ryan arrived to find Eleanor already at the clinic, arguing with Sarah about proper rehabilitation techniques. "My husband trained military dogs for 26 years, she informed Sarah with the certainty of the very old. "Walter always said muscle memory comes back before anything else. You need to move those legs in the proper patterns." To Ryan's surprise, Sarah was taking notes instead of dismissing the older woman. Later, she incorporated Eleanor's suggestions into Max's physical therapy routine, and the results were promising: improved circulation, less muscle wastage, stronger vital signs during the exercises. "You should have seen her husband with those dogs," Sarah told Ryan while demonstrating the new technique. Walter Winters was a legend in service dog training. Half the K9 units in Vietnam used his methods. She smiled at Ryan's surprise. "Bridgewater's a small town. Everyone's connected if you dig deep enough." By day 21, Max was not only opening his eyes regularly, but tracking movement and responding to voices. The breakthrough came during Ryan's evening visit. He'd been talking softly as usual, telling Max about his day at the VA center when he mentioned a troublesome air conditioner unit. "Had to take the whole thing apart," Ryan said. "Reminded me of that time in Kandahar when the cooling system failed in the comm center, and we had to—" Max's head lifted slightly off the cushioned padding, eyes fixed on Ryan with unmistakable recognition. "Max?" Ryan whispered. The dog's tail moved, just once, a weak thump against the bedding, but intentional, deliberate. Sarah observed from the doorway, clipboard clutched to her chest, unwilling to interrupt the moment. When Max finally drifted back to sleep, She entered with suspicious brightness in her eyes. "That's the first time he's responded directly to you. He knows who you are, Ryan." The next morning, Ryan called the VA center to request more hours. Diane at reception regretfully informed him that budget cuts had actually reduced available maintenance work. "But," she added hesitantly, "Tom over at Riverside Gardens is looking for weekend help with their landscaping. Hard work in this heat, though." Done. Ryan took the landscaping job, working Saturdays and Sundays from dawn until 2, then heading straight to the clinic. The additional income helped with Max's mounting bills, but it wasn't enough. At night, in his sparse apartment, Ryan began cataloging his few possessions, calculating their potential value. His grandfather's watch covered a week of antibiotics. His leather jacket paid for a specialized kidney function test. The collection of first-edition Hemingway novels, the only luxury he'd ever allowed himself, financed a consultation with a veterinary specialist from Hartford. What Ryan didn't sell was the small wooden box containing his military medals, not from pride, but because they'd fetched too little to justify the loss. The clinic's receptionist started a 3-ring binder for the cards and letters that arrived for Max. Children from the elementary school sent crayon drawings of German shepherds with bandages and superhero capes. Veterans from the local VFW post dropped by, many sitting silently with Ryan during his vigil, understanding without explanation. June melted into July, bringing suffocating humidity that stressed the clinic's aging air conditioning system. Sarah worked increasingly long hours, often staying after closing to monitor Max's progress and adjust his treatment plan. One evening, returning with coffee for them both, Ryan found her asleep at her desk, her computer screen displaying research articles on canine rehabilitation. "You're killing yourself over this dog," Ryan said when she startled awake. Sarah rubbed her eyes, smudging the makeup she rarely bothered to refresh during her marathon shifts. "It's not just about Max," she admitted. "It's about—" She gestured vaguely, unable to articulate something fundamental. That night, as Max slept peacefully after his most successful physical therapy session yet, Sarah told Ryan about her husband, Captain James Mitchell, Army Medical Corps, killed by a roadside bomb while evacuating wounded from an ambush. 10 years ago next month. "He believed every life was worth fighting for, even when the odds were impossible," she said, twisting her wedding ring. "His unit had a service dog, a medical detection dog trained to find wounded soldiers. After James died, I started volunteering at the VA hospital, working with their therapy dogs." She gave Ryan a tired smile. "That's how I ended up specializing in veterinary medicine. Came full circle, I guess." Ryan nodded, understanding the symmetry of their situations, both orbiting around the absence of something vital, both finding unexpected purpose in Max's struggle. Day 30 brought a setback. Max's kidney function tests returned with concerning results. The prolonged course of powerful antibiotics had taken a toll. "He needs specialized treatment," Sarah explained, the stress evident in her voice. "A course of renal protective therapy, possibly dialysis if things worsen." The estimate she reluctantly provided made Ryan's stomach sink. Even with the community donations and his extra work, the amount was beyond reach. That night in his apartment, Ryan opened the wooden box containing his medals. The Purple Heart gleamed dully in the lamplight. Not worth much in monetary terms, but perhaps enough to buy Max more time. The pawn shop owner, a Vietnam veteran himself, recognized the medal immediately. "Can't do it, son," he said, pushing it back across the counter. "Not this. Anything but this." Ryan returned to his apartment, defeated. He was sorting through his few remaining possessions when a knock at the door startled him. Eleanor Winters stood in the hallway, leaning on her cane. "Thought it was time I saw where you live," she announced, brushing past him into the apartment. She surveyed the sparse room with a critical eye. "Just as I expected, barely living at all." And before Ryan could respond, she placed an envelope on the kitchen counter. "Walter's veterans insurance policy finally paid out a dispute. Took them 30 years, the cheapskates. I'm too old to spend it." Ryan tried to refuse, but Eleanor fixed him with the imperious stare that had cowed generations of Bridgewater residents. "That dog saved someone once," she said with absolute certainty. "I can see it in his eyes. We owe our service animals better than what he got." She left as abruptly as she'd arrived, leaving Ryan holding an envelope containing $5,000 and a note that simply read, "Walter would have done the same." The specialized treatment began the following day. Max responded well initially, his eyes brighter, his movements more deliberate. On day 35, he managed to sit up unassisted for nearly a minute, a moment Sarah captured on her phone, her hands shaking with excitement. "I'm sending this to every vet who told me he wouldn't make it," she said, uploading the video to the clinic's newly created Facebook page. The post was shared 300 times in the first day. Local news picked it up, then regional. A reporter from Hartford visited, writing a feature that included Max's military background and the community's efforts to save him. Someone created the hashtag #MaxTheWarrior, which quickly gained traction beyond Bridgewater. Ryan, uncomfortable with the attention, focused instead on Max's physical therapy. Following Eleanor's guidelines and Sarah's medical expertise, he worked with Max for hours each day. Gentle resistance exercises, range of motion work, even hydrotherapy in a kiddie pool behind the clinic. Max's progress was slow but undeniable, each small victory celebrated by an expanding circle of supporters. As Max grew stronger, so did the fragments of memory in Ryan's dreams. The burning apartment building took clearer shape, a residential complex near their forward operating base in Afghanistan. Ryan saw himself entering with his unit, despite civilians shouting that the structure was unstable. He remembered searching room by room, the air thick with smoke, communication growing chaotic over the radio. In the dreams, he now clearly saw Max working with another handler, a tall officer giving commands as Max systematically searched for survivors. Ryan remembered reaching the top floor, finding a family trapped in a bathroom, passing the children out to his team. Then the ceiling collapsing, trapping him, the radio crackling with evacuation orders. And Max, breaking away from his handler, ignoring commands, fighting through debris to reach Ryan, dragging him toward a narrow passage to safety. The officer shouting, his voice filled with anguish, "Max! Heal! There's a child still missing." But Max continued pulling Ryan to safety, even as flames engulfed the remaining section of the building. Ryan woke from these dreams sweating but no longer terrified, piecing together what had happened. Why Max had been transferred from his unit, why someone might have wanted to punish this dog who had followed his instinct rather than his orders. On day 42, Sarah cleared Max for his first tentative steps. Ryan stood 3 feet from Max's bed, heart pounding as the dog struggled to his feet. Max swayed, legs trembling, determination evident in every line of his body. Then, painstakingly, he took one step toward Ryan, a second, a third. His strength gave out on the fourth, but Ryan caught him before he could fall, cradling the dog against his chest. "You did it, buddy," Ryan whispered, not caring that Sarah was filming, that the techs were wiping away tears, that Eleanor was clasping her hands like she was witnessing a miracle. In a way, she was. The video of Max's first steps went viral overnight. Max, The warrior trended briefly in the northeast. Donations flowed in from around the country, not enough to cover all his treatment, but sufficient to ensure it could continue. Children sent homemade dog toys. Veterans sent patches and unit insignia to decorate Max's recovery area. On day 45, a large bouquet arrived at the clinic with a note requesting information about Max's prognosis. The sender identified himself as a former military officer interested in service animal welfare. Sarah, distracted by an emergency case, asked her receptionist to provide general details about Max's recovery. That evening, as Sarah was reviewing Max's latest test results, kidney function stabilizing, weight gradually increasing, infection finally cleared, her phone rang. The clinic's security company reported that their motion sensors had been triggered. Probably just the summer storm blowing open that sticky back door again, Sarah thought as she drove back to check. She was retrieving her keys when she noticed an expensive black sedan parked across the street, engine running. A tall man in a business suit sat in the driver's seat, watching the clinic intently. Something about his posture, his focused attention, raised the hair on Sarah's neck. She hurried inside, double-checking all the doors before looking in on Max. The dog was awake, ears pricked forward, a low growl rumbling in his chest, the first vocalization he'd made since Ryan found him. When Ryan arrived the following morning, Sarah shared her concerns. Something spooked Max last night, and there was a man watching the clinic. Ryan's expression hardened. What did he look like? Tall, expensive suit, driving a black Audi, military bearing. Ryan nodded slowly, pieces falling into place. I think I might know who's interested in Max, and why. As if confirming his suspicion, Max's entire demeanor had changed. The relaxed progress of recent days replaced by hypervigilance, his eyes constantly tracking the doorway, his body tense despite his weakness. He's afraid, Ryan said quietly. Not just anxious, genuinely afraid. Sarah checked her watch. I need to step out for supplies. Will you stay with him until I get back? After she left, Ryan sat beside Max, speaking softly, trying to ease the dog's obvious distress. Outside, summer thunder rumbled as another afternoon storm approached. Ryan was demonstrating a new therapy exercise when Max suddenly froze, his gaze locked on the clinic's front entrance, a tremor running through his body. Ryan turned to see a tall man standing in the doorway, impeccably dressed despite the building heat, his face instantly recognizable despite the passing years. "Hello, Ranger Anderson," said Sean Parker, his voice as cold as Ryan remembered from that terrible night. "I believe you have something that belongs to me." The reception area crackled with tension as Sean Parker stepped inside, raindrops glistening on his tailored suit. The years had hardened him, success sculpting his features into something colder than Ryan remembered. Behind the reception desk, the young technician sensed the atmosphere shift and quietly excused herself. "Captain Parker," Ryan acknowledged, positioning himself between Sean and Max's treatment area. The military titles fell naturally between them, as if the years had collapsed. "It's CEO Parker now," Sean corrected, his gaze drifting past Ryan to where Max lay trembling. "Quite the community project you've undertaken. Very heartwarming." Ryan remained silent, calculating. The man before him had once been his commanding officer, respected and admired. Until the fire. Until Max made his choice. 3 weeks ago, Sean continued when Ryan didn't respond, a substantial anonymous donation covered specialized kidney treatment for a German Shepherd at this clinic. Curious timing considering I'd just learned about your pet project. Max whimpered softly, attempting to rise despite his weakness. Ryan placed a gentle hand on the dog's shoulder, steadying him. "You made the donation," Ryan said. Not a question, but a confirmation. Sean's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Consider it an investment in recovering my property." "Max isn't property." "Technically, he is." Sean removed a folder from his briefcase, sliding it across the counter. "Military service animals remain government property unless formally decommissioned and adopted through proper channels. Max was transferred after Afghanistan, not decommissioned." Ryan opened the folder, scanning documents with official letterheads and legal language. "You arranged his transfer after the fire." "I arranged appropriate reassignment for an animal that failed his mission," Sean corrected, his composure slipping slightly. "An animal that chose to save one soldier rather than completing his search for civilians." The accusation hung between them as thunder rumbled outside. Ryan's fragmented memories solidified. The apartment building engulfed in flames, his team searching for the family reportedly trapped inside, the ceiling collapse that pinned him as fire spread. Max breaking away from Sean to drag Ryan to safety, ignoring commands to continue searching. "The building was collapsing," Ryan said quietly. The structural engineers had already called for evacuation. Sean's laugh was brittle. "Is that what you tell yourself? That everyone was already safe? That Max made the right choice?" His veneer of control cracked, revealing the rage beneath. "My wife and daughter were still in there." The revelation hit Ryan like physical blow. Captain Parker's family had been living near the forward operating base, one of the few families permitted in the relatively secure area. Ryan had known they were evacuating civilians from the building, but not who those civilians were. "I didn't know," Ryan said, the inadequacy of the words burning his throat. "Rachel was 5, Sean continued, his voice dangerously steady. "Amanda was helping neighbors evacuate when the first explosion hit. They were on the top floor. The last transmission from your team confirmed civilians still unaccounted for on the upper level." His gaze locked on Max. He was supposed to find them. Instead, he chose you. Max's trembling intensified, a whine escaping as he tried to retreat from Sean's voice. The monitor beside his bed showed elevated heart rate, blood pressure spiking dangerously. "You need to leave," Ryan said, concern for Max overriding everything else. "He's not stable enough for this." "No," Sean agreed coldly. "He never was. That's why I made sure he was transferred to a handler who understood discipline, who would correct his priorities." The implication turned Ryan's blood to ice. "You arranged for him to be abused." "I arranged appropriate retraining," Sean corrected, straightening his cuffs. "Unfortunately, his new handler exceeded protocols. When the military investigated, Max conveniently disappeared from the kennel. I assumed he'd died until your little social media campaign." The clinic door opened as Sarah returned, arms full of supply bags. She froze, assessing the situation with a medical professional's precision. "What's happening here?" Her eyes darted to Max's monitors, then narrowed at Sean. "Sir, I need to ask you to leave. My patient is in distress." Sean ignored her, addressing Ryan. "I've filed paperwork to reclaim military property that was illegally removed from service. My lawyers are confident—" "Your name," Sarah interrupted, stepping forward, recognition dawning. "Parker. The anonymous donation came from Parker Insurance." Her expression hardened as she connected the dots. "You funded his treatment so you could claim ownership." Sean smiled thinly. "I funded treatment for an asset I intend to recover. Legally." Sarah placed herself beside Ryan. a united front. This asset was near death from systematic abuse when Mr. Anderson found him. As his treating veterinarian, I've documented evidence of prolonged mistreatment that would interest both military investigators and animal welfare authorities. Unfortunate, Sean conceded, unruffled, but irrelevant to the ownership question. I have no knowledge of any mistreatment after his transfer. You're lying, Ryan said quietly. Sean's composure finally cracked, pain flashing across his features. That dog chose to save one soldier rather than continue searching for my family. Tell me, Anderson, what would you have done in my position? The question hung in the air, interrupted by a warning beep from Max's monitors. Sarah rushed to the treatment area where Max had collapsed, his body seizing. His blood pressure's crashing. Ryan, help me. As they stabilized Max, administering emergency medication, Sean watched from the doorway. Something flickered in his expression, doubt, perhaps, or an unwelcome pang of conscience, before it hardened again. My lawyers will contact you, he said, leaving a business card on the counter before walking out into the storm. The next 12 hours became a desperate fight to reverse Max's setback. Sarah administered anti-seizure medication, adjusted his fluids, monitored his faltering kidney function. Ryan remained by Max's side, speaking softly, steadying him through tremors that racked his recovering body. The stress triggered acute kidney injury, Sarah explained during a rare break, exhaustion etched in the lines around her eyes. We've lost at least 2 weeks of progress, maybe more. Word of Sean Parker's visit spread quickly through Bridgewater's efficient small-town network. By morning, the clinic's phone rang constantly with calls of support and offers of assistance. The local newspaper ran a front-page story. Corporate CEO threatens beloved rescue dog, complete with Max's recovery photos, juxtaposed with Parker Insurance's imposing Hartford headquarters. Online, the backlash was immediate and fierce. #boycott Parker Insurance began trending regionally. Veterans groups issued statements supporting Max and Ryan. The clinic's Facebook page received thousands of messages, many from military families sharing stories of service animals that had saved their loved ones. His company's stock dropped 8 points this morning, Sarah reported, showing Ryan a news article on her phone. The board called an emergency meeting. Ryan shook his head, no satisfaction in the knowledge. This isn't about public opinion for him. It's personal. Eleanor arrived that afternoon, her weathered face grave as she surveyed Max's deteriorated condition. Setbacks are part of healing, she said matter-of-factly, placing her usual food container in the small refrigerator. She fixed Ryan with a penetrating stare. Walter came back from Vietnam with pieces missing. Some you could see, most you couldn't. Rage ate at him like cancer. She settled into the chair beside Ryan, her arthritic hands smoothing imaginary wrinkles from her dress. One night, during the worst of it, I asked if he hated the men who'd planted the mine that took his leg. Know what he said? Ryan shook his head. Hating them is like drinking poison and expecting them to die. Eleanor's gaze drifted to Max's sleeping form. Took Walter 20 years to forgive himself for surviving when his friends didn't. Don't know if this Parker fella has 20 years to waste. That evening, a legal courier delivered formal documents asserting Sean's claim to Max through military channels. Sarah immediately contacted her cousin in the Army Veterinary Corps, who promised to investigate the service records. Ryan reached out to former unit members, several of whom remembered the incident, and offered to provide statements about the building's imminent collapse. As Ryan researched legal options, his phone rang with an unlisted number. The local VFW commander had connected him with a veteran-focused legal aid organization willing to take the case pro bono. "They say he doesn't have a case," the commander reported. "Military working dogs have been reclassified as personnel, not equipment, since 2016. His documentation is outdated." Ryan should have felt relieved. But as he watched Max struggling through another physical therapy session, now barely able to stand for 30 seconds when he'd previously managed several minutes, anger overwhelmed him. This wasn't just about legal ownership. Sean Parker had orchestrated Max's suffering, arranging his transfer, enabling his abuse, and now triggering a potentially fatal setback. The same afternoon, Dr. James Reynolds, the veterinary specialist from Hartford who'd consulted on Max's case, arrived for an emergency evaluation. His assessment was guarded. "The kidney damage may be permanent this time. We're seeing elevated toxin levels despite the dialysis protocol." Sarah insisted on consulting a nephrologist colleague in New York, conferencing late into the night about experimental treatments. Ryan listened to the medical terminology washing over him, understanding only that Max's condition had become critical again, their hard-won progress evaporating. After everyone left, Ryan sat alone with Max in the darkened clinic, the rhythmic beep of monitors marking time. "I should have protected you," he whispered, the admission painful. From him. From all of this. Max's eyes opened briefly, finding Ryan's in the dim light. Despite everything, there was no fear in that gaze, only the steady trust that had survived abuse, abandonment, and now this new betrayal. A heavy knock at the clinic's front door startled Ryan. Through the glass, he recognized the VFW commander accompanied by 3 former Rangers in civilian clothes, men who had served in their unit. Behind them stood at least 20 veterans of various ages, many in service caps or displaying unit patches. "Thought you could use some reinforcements," the commander said when Ryan opened the door. "Word's out that Parker's sending corporate security to secure his property tonight. Figured we'd secure it first." As the veterans established a protective presence around the clinic, Ryan faced a decision that had been building since Sean walked through the door. He could fight, legally, publicly, perhaps physically if necessary, protecting Max through sheer force of will and community support. Or he could seek another path, the harder one Eleanor had hinted at, addressing the wounded man behind Sean's corporate mask. "Get me a secure phone," Ryan told the commander. "I need to make a call." By morning, the standoff had transformed into something else entirely. Veterans from 3 counties established a rotation schedule outside the clinic, their presence quiet but unmistakable. The Bridgewater Gazette ran a front-page story with a photo of former service members standing vigil, veterans of conflicts spanning from Vietnam to Afghanistan, united in purpose. "Community stands guard for Hero Dog," declared the headline, beneath which reporter Molly Jenkins detailed Max's military service and Ryan's rescue efforts. "This isn't just about one dog," Vietnam veteran Frank Simmons told the paper. "It's about the promise we make to those who serve alongside us. Human or canine, you don't leave them behind." Inside the clinic, a different battle raged. Despite aggressive treatment, Max's kidney function continued to deteriorate. Sarah worked around the clock, consulting specialists across the country, implementing each suggested protocol with meticulous precision. Ryan divided his time between Max's physical therapy, legal meetings, and managing the growing media attention. "We've filed for an emergency injunction," explained Catherine Wheeler, the veteran affairs attorney who had taken the case. Her organized efficiency reminded Ryan of mission briefings in Afghanistan. Parker's claim hinges on outdated regulations. The 2016 National Defense Authorization Act reclassified military working dogs from equipment to personnel. More importantly, we have documentation that Max was medically discharged, not just transferred." "How did you find that?" Ryan asked. Catherine smiled. "Your VFW friends have connections. A retired quartermaster remembered Max's case specifically because of the unusual circumstances. The official discharge papers were processed but apparently misplaced before reaching the adoption agency." As Catherine built their legal defense, the story spread beyond Bridgewater. Regional news stations parked vans outside the clinic. National veteran organizations issued statements of support. Justice for Max trended on multiple platforms, with military working dog handlers sharing stories of the bonds formed in service. On day 52, Eleanor arrived with reinforcements of her own, the Gray Brigade, as they quickly became known. Seniors from her retirement community established a comfortable command center in the clinic's waiting room, coordinating food deliveries, managing social media responses, and fielding calls from supporters worldwide. "My grandson set up one of those internet money collections," Eleanor informed Ryan, handing him a printout. "Says we've raised nearly $40,000 already. People from all 50 states and 13 countries." The fundraising surge couldn't have come at a more critical time. Max's specialized treatments had exhausted the clinic's resources and Ryan's finances. The experimental protocol Sarah wanted to try required equipment the small-town facility didn't possess. "Children's hospitals use this technique for kidney recovery," Sarah explained, showing Ryan the research. "There's a pediatric medical center in Boston willing to adapt their equipment for canine use, but the transport alone would cost thousands." "Do it," Ryan said immediately, trusting her judgment completely. As they prepared for Max's transport to Boston, Ryan received a call from a Hartford number he didn't recognize. The woman on the line identified herself as Rachel Parker, Sean's daughter. "My father doesn't know I'm calling," she began, her voice steady but cautious. "I saw the news coverage about Max. I had to reach out." Ryan sat heavily on the clinic's back steps, the phone pressed to his ear. "Your father said you died in that fire." A pause, then, "He believes I did. By the time they pulled me out, he'd already been evacuated with severe burns." "They couldn't find my mother. The military decided," her voice faltered. "They decided it would be better to list us both as casualties until they could notify him properly. But when they found him at the field hospital, his psychological state was so fragile that the doctors recommended waiting. And then I was sent to my grandparents in the States. My father was transferred to a burn unit in Germany. By the time he was stable enough for the truth, I'd been legally placed with my grandparents, and he'd changed. The psychologist felt revealing my survival might trigger a dangerous breakdown." Her voice trembled slightly. "My grandparents decided to respect the doctor's recommendations. They raised me in Maine under my mother's maiden name." The revelation staggered Ryan. "You've been alive all this time and he doesn't know?" "I found out the truth when I turned 18, Rachel explained. "I've struggled with whether to contact him. I've watched him from a distance, seen what grief turned him into. I made the anonymous donation for Max's treatment because—" She paused, searching for words. "Because saving that dog felt like saving some part of who my father used to be." The conversation shifted Ryan's understanding of everything. Sean's grief, his fixation on Max, the depth of his pain. It wasn't just about a dog disobeying orders. It was about a man shattered by loss, directing his rage at the most tangible target. That evening, as Max was being prepped for transport, Dr. Sarah Mitchell faced her own professional crisis. The State Veterinary Board called an emergency review of her license, citing complaints about excessive treatment and misallocation of resources for a terminally ill animal. The timing and specificity of the complaints pointed to Sean's influence. "They can't suspend me before a full hearing," Sarah assured Ryan, though her hands trembled as she administered Max's pre-transport medications. "That gives us at least 3 weeks. Max will either have recovered by then or—" She didn't finish the sentence. They both understood the stakes. The town of Bridgewater itself had become divided over the case. While most supported Max and Ryan, others questioned the resources being dedicated to a dog when the town's food bank struggled for donations and the school needed repairs. The debate spilled over into town council meetings, church gatherings, and diner conversations. Pastor Mitchell from the First Baptist Church addressed the division in his Sunday sermon. "Some ask why we give so much to an animal when humans are suffering. I ask instead, when did compassion become a limited resource? When did we decide that opening our hearts to one being closes them to another?" His words resonated beyond his congregation. Local businesses began donating portions of their proceeds to both Max's treatment fund and the food bank. The elementary school organized a dual fundraiser for Max and school repairs, raising more for both than either had received separately. Amidst the growing community movement, Max continued his fight. On day 58, the experimental treatment showed its first promising results: improved kidney function, better blood work, more stable vital signs. Sarah sent hourly updates to the Boston specialists, who adjusted protocols in real time. Day 60 marked a milestone that no one had dared anticipate. During his morning physical therapy, with Ryan providing gentle support and Eleanor recording on her grandson's iPad, Max stood independently for nearly 2 minutes. Then, as the clinic staff watched in stunned silence, he took 4 deliberate steps toward Ryan before his strength gave out. The video of those steps, posted by Eleanor's grandson with the caption, "They said he'd never walk again," had Max the Warrior, garnered over 3 million views in 24 hours. News vans descended on Bridgewater in even greater numbers. Veterans groups organized a motorcycle procession past the clinic in salute. Children left handmade cards and dog toys in a growing pile by the entrance. Through it all, Max continued his grueling physical therapy, adding steps each day, rebuilding atrophied muscles through sheer determination. As public attention intensified, the threats from Sean Parker and his legal team grew more desperate. Catherine Wheeler fielded increasingly aggressive communications, some implying investigations into Sarah's medical practices, others threatening to scrutinize Ryan's military discharge. "He's getting desperate," Catherine observed after a particularly hostile call. "His board of directors is pressuring him to drop the whole thing. The publicity is killing their stock value." Ryan nodded, but his mind was elsewhere, on Rachel's revelation, on Sean's hidden pain, on the possibility that this conflict could end with something other than destruction. He had placed a call of his own the previous evening, requesting a private meeting away from cameras and supporters. His phone vibrated with a text response as Max completed his afternoon therapy session. "Tomorrow, 7 a.m., the old fire tower at Bridgewater State Forest. Come alone." As Ryan helped settle Max for the evening, the dog's eyes followed him with increasing awareness. For the first time since his rescue, Max's tail wagged with genuine enthusiasm rather than tentative hope. Sarah noticed too, pausing her chart notes to watch the interaction. "Whatever happens with Parker," she said softly, "you've already won the battle that matters." Dawn had barely broken when Ryan reached the fire tower at Bridgewater State Forest. Mist clung to the pines, promising another sweltering July day. Sean Parker already stood at the base of the rusted structure, his usual corporate polish replaced by casual clothes that reminded Ryan of their deployment days. "You came alone," Sean observed, his expression guarded. "So did you," Ryan replied, noticing the absence of security or lawyers. Their conversation, halting at first, gradually unlocked years of misunderstanding. Ryan shared the complete memory of that night. The structural engineer's warning, the evacuation order that came moments before the collapse, Max's decision that saved his life, but haunted them both. "I've blamed that dog for years," Sean finally admitted, staring out at the forest. "Easier than facing the real truth, that I wasn't there when my family needed me. That I sent others to save them while I coordinated from the command post." Ryan didn't offer empty reassurances, recognizing that some guilt couldn't, perhaps shouldn't, be entirely absolved. Instead, he delivered the news that would forever change everything. "Your daughter is alive, Sean." The revelation hit with physical force. Sean staggered, gripping a support beam as Ryan explained Rachel's survival, the well-intentioned deception by military doctors, her life with grandparents in Maine. Sean's composure crumbled completely, decades of grief transforming into something beyond words. Before they could discuss what came next, Ryan's phone rang urgently. Sarah's voice came through, tight with panic. "The storm knocked out power across town. Our generator's failing. Max's dialysis machine is shutting down intermittently. We need to relocate him immediately." The summer storm that had been building for days had finally arrived with unexpected ferocity. Ryan raced back toward town, Sean following in his Audi. Bridgewater's streets had transformed into shallow rivers, tree branches scattered across flooded intersections. The clinic's parking lot stood under 6 inches of water when they arrived. Inside, chaos reigned. Sarah worked frantically to maintain Max's treatment as the lights flickered. "The hospital's generator is stable," she explained breathlessly, "but their emergency room is flooded. They can't take patients." "What about the community center?" Ryan suggested, remembering its recent renovation. "Running on backup power only," Eleanor reported from her makeshift command post. Despite the crisis, the Gray Brigade had expanded their operation, coordinating information from throughout town on ancient flip phones and hand radios. "My company's regional office in Waterbury has full generator backup and climate control," Sean said, startling everyone with his presence. "It's a 30-minute drive." Sarah assessed Max's monitors. "He'll need continuous dialysis during transport. His condition is too unstable to interrupt treatment." "I have a solution," Sean replied, already on his phone. 2 of my company's emergency response vehicles are equipped with medical transport capabilities. We use them for disaster insurance assessments. They're self-contained, with generator power." Within 20 minutes, a black customized van with the Parker Insurance logo pulled up outside. EMTs in company uniforms efficiently prepared for transport, connecting Max's equipment to the vehicle's power supply. "We'll need a veterinary transport permit," Sarah worried. "Already handled," Sean assured her, displaying emergency authorization on his phone. "Benefits of corporate legal departments." As they prepared to move Max, the clinic's roof developed an ominous leak directly over the electrical panel, sending sparks flying. The lights failed completely, leaving only emergency battery backups for Max's essential equipment. "We have 15 minutes of battery life," Sarah calculated as they rushed Max's stretcher toward the waiting vehicle. The transfer had barely begun when catastrophe struck. A massive oak from the neighboring property crashed through the clinic's side wall, destroying the remaining electrical infrastructure. In the chaos of broken glass and falling debris, Ryan's world collapsed. The sound, splintering wood, shattering glass, people shouting, catapulted him back to Afghanistan. The burning building, trapped civilians, his team in danger. His breath came in ragged gasps, vision tunneling as the full-blown PTSD episode overtook him. He pressed himself against the wall, combat instinct screaming for cover, for weapons, for escape. "Ryan!" Sarah's voice penetrated the fog, but he couldn't respond, couldn't move from where he'd wedged himself behind equipment. Then, impossibly, Max was there. Despite his weakness, despite the IV lines and monitoring equipment, the German shepherd had pulled himself from the transport gurney. Moving with painful determination, he dragged himself to Ryan's side, pressing his body against Ryan's legs, grounding him in the present moment. "He's supposed to be sedated for transport," Sarah whispered, witnessing something she couldn't explain medically. Sean watched the interaction, recognition dawning in his eyes. "He's doing what he was trained to do," he said quietly, bringing his person back from the edge. With Max's steady presence, Ryan gradually regained control, the episode receding enough to function. Together, the unlikely team completed the transfer to the emergency vehicle. Sean drove while Sarah monitored Max's vital signs. Ryan sat on the floor beside Max's stretcher, the dog's head resting against his leg. The journey to Waterbury became a nightmare of flooded roads and detours. Max's condition deteriorated as they navigated the storm, his kidney function declining precipitously despite the continuous dialysis. "His blood pressure's dropping," Sarah reported, administering emergency medications. "The stress of the move is too much." When they finally reached Parker Insurance's regional headquarters, a medical team waited to assist. The building's conference room had been hastily converted to a treatment area, with specialized equipment rushed in from Hartford Hospital under Sean's authorization. "Whatever he needs," Sean told Sarah as she assessed the setup. "No limitations." Through the night, they worked in rotating shifts. Sarah coordinated with specialists across the country by video call. Ryan maintained physical contact with Max, whose condition stabilized slightly with familiar presence. Sean leveraged every corporate and personal connection to obtain specialized medications and equipment. Back in Bridgewater, Eleanor orchestrated community support with military precision. The Gray Brigade established a prayer circle in the community center, while younger volunteers delivered supplies to the Parker facility through flooded roads. By dawn, Max's condition remained critical but no longer in freefall. The experimental treatment protocol continued, with modifications based on real-time consultation with specialists in Boston, New York, and Colorado. "He's fighting," Sarah told Ryan as they watched Max's chest rise and fall in troubled sleep. "But his system has taken too many hits. We need to make some decisions." Sean, overhearing, stepped forward. "What options do we have left?" Sarah hesitated, then outlined a radical intervention developed for military working dogs with traumatic injuries. "It's experimental, extremely expensive, only performed at 3 facilities nationwide." "Where's the closest one?" Sean asked. "Walter Reed National Military Medical Center," Sarah replied. "They've pioneered regenerative treatments for service animals with critical organ damage." "That's in Maryland," Ryan said, calculating the impossibility of the journey in Max's condition. "I have a corporate jet at Bradley International," Sean stated matter-of-factly. "It can be ready in an hour. The medical transport equipment can be transferred directly." Ryan looked at the man who had been his adversary just days before. "Why would you do this?" Sean gazed at Max, who stirred restlessly in his medicated sleep. "Because you were right about what matters," he said simply. "And I've been wrong for a very long time." The corporate jet cut through storm clouds as they raced toward Walter Reed, the cabin converted into a makeshift intensive care unit. Sarah monitored Max's failing vitals, while a flight medic, a veteran Sean had somehow located in Hartford with veterinary combat experience, assisted with the dialysis equipment. Ryan remained by Max's side, one hand resting on the shepherd's chest, feeling each labored breath. "His kidney values are still climbing," Sarah murmured, studying the portable monitor. "We're losing ground." The experimental treatment at Walter Reed represented their last hope, a specialized dialysis protocol developed for military working dogs with severe toxin exposure. The facility had agreed to attempt the procedure on Max after Sean made a series of calls that demonstrated both his influence and his desperation. Max's condition deteriorated rapidly during the final descent. The cabin filled with warning tones as his oxygen levels plummeted. Sarah worked with practiced efficiency, adjusting medications and oxygen flow, but the grim set of her mouth told Ryan everything. They were losing him. Military ambulance personnel met them on the tarmac, transferring Max to the Veterinary Medical Center with practiced precision. A team of specialists waited inside, already briefed on Max's condition and history. Ryan followed the gurney until a gentle hand on his shoulder stopped him at the treatment room doors. "We need to work now," said the lead veterinarian, compassion in her eyes. "Someone will update you shortly." The waiting area became their silent battleground. Ryan paced while Sarah consulted with the medical team by phone. Sean made calls, his voice low and urgent, leveraging every connection from his military and corporate life. 3 hours passed without news. When the door finally opened, the veterinarian's expression confirmed Ryan's worst fears. "We've tried everything in our protocol," she said quietly. "His organs are shutting down systematically. I'm so sorry." "Can I see him?" Ryan asked, his voice hollow. They found Max connected to more machines than seemed possible for his frail body. Monitors tracked his failing systems with merciless precision. Ryan knelt beside the treatment table, one hand finding its place on Max's chest, where sparse fur had been shaved away for equipment access. "You fought so hard, buddy," he whispered. "No one would blame you for resting now." Sarah stood at the monitors, a professional mask hiding her devastation as she watched Max's readings. Sean remained near the door, an outsider to their intimate circle of grief, yet somehow essential to its completion. The warning tones changed pitch, becoming more urgent. "His heart rhythm is deteriorating," Sarah translated unnecessarily. The pattern on the screen told its own story. Then, with devastating simplicity, the erratic peaks flattened into a single, unbroken line. The harsh monotone of cardiac arrest filled the room. "No," Ryan breathed, his composure finally shattering completely. "Max, please, not like this." The medical team moved with practiced efficiency, administering cardiac medications, attempting resuscitation. Ryan refused to move from Max's side, his body shielding the dog from the clinical chaos around them. "Time of arrest, 15:43, someone said after 97 seconds of futile intervention. The room fell into a terrible stillness, broken only by the continued flatline tone, until someone mercifully silenced it. "I should have gotten to him sooner," Ryan said, his voice raw with a confession that had waited years to emerge. "If I'd found him earlier, before the damage was so extensive." "This isn't your fault," Sarah said, her own tears falling freely now. "It's mine," Sean interjected, moving closer to the table. "All of it. I transferred him knowing what would happen. I wanted him to suffer because my family had suffered." His composure crumbled entirely. "I spent years blaming a dog for making an impossible choice, for saving you instead of continuing to search." Ryan looked up, meeting Sean's gaze across Max's still form. He was following his training. Service dogs are taught to prioritize the handler they can save over those they might not reach. I know that now, Sean admitted. But after losing Amanda and Rachel, I needed something to blame. Someone to punish. His voice broke. The truth is, I wasn't even supposed to be at the command post that night. I switched assignments to finish paperwork, sent my second to the search operation instead. If I'd been there myself, your daughter survived, Ryan reminded him gently. And I missed 20 years of her life because I couldn't let go of my anger. Sean moved closer to Max, hesitantly placing a hand on the shepherd's shoulder. I did this to him, and now it's too late to make it right. The three stood in silence, united in grief and regret. Outside, rain lashed against windows as the summer storm followed them down the coast. The treatment room, with its harsh lighting and medical equipment, felt both sterile and suffocating. He deserves military honors, Sean said finally. I'll make the arrangements. He was more than a military asset, Ryan countered, his hand still resting on Max's chest. He was a hero, Sarah added, her professional detachment long abandoned. Ryan leaned close to Max's ear, whispering the formal command for final rest that military working dogs received at the end of service. Guardian, your watch is complete. Stand down. In the devastating silence that followed, Ryan thought he felt the slightest movement beneath his hand, a muscle tremor, perhaps, or just wishful imagination. Then Max's ear, the one that had always responded first to commands, twitched almost imperceptibly. Sarah gasped, lunging for the monitors. "That's impossible," she whispered, staring at the screen where the faintest rhythm had appeared. He was gone for over a minute. "Max?" Ryan's voice broke on the single syllable. The cardiac monitor beeped weakly, then again with slightly more strength. Some call it a miracle, but perhaps it's something more profound, the undeniable power of love, loyalty, and second chances. Max's journey from abandoned military hero to beloved survivor reminds us that our most meaningful victories often come after our darkest moments. When that cardiac monitor began beeping again at Walter Reed, it wasn't just Max's heart restarting. It was Ryan finding purpose, Sarah rediscovering faith, Sean embracing forgiveness, and Eleanor witnessing her late husband's legacy continue. Like Max, many of us have faced our own battles, health challenges, loss, regret, or loneliness. But his story teaches us that healing happens in community, that purpose can find us when we least expect it, and that it's never too late for a new beginning. The bonds formed between strangers united by compassion created something miraculous in Bridgewater, reminding us that family isn't always blood, and heroes come in all forms, even on four legs. Has an animal ever helped you through a difficult time in ways humans couldn't? Or when was a moment a community came together for you when you needed it most? Please, share your stories in the comments. Your experience might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today.